History painted them as gentlemen of refinement, landowners, patriarchs, men of honor. But behind closed doors, these so-called masters carried filthy secrets, unspeakable acts buried in silence for centuries. In the parlor, wine glasses clinked beneath chandeliers. Outside, the night groaned with the metallic rattle of chains. In the hallways, whispers moved like shadows. They didn't just own bodies. They violated them, experimented with them, destroyed them, and hid their filth behind wealth and power. Tonight, the dirty truths of white masters on black men and women will finally be exposed. The stage was the 18th and 19th centuries, America and the Caribbean, the brutal height of the transatlantic slave system. To the world, the plantations looked like kingdoms, sprawling fields, ballrooms echoing with violins, portraits of noble gentlemen framed in gold. These men were celebrated as leaders, protectors, builders of nations. But every stone of their mansions, every coin in their pockets, every smile in those family portraits was built on human suffering. Beyond the frame of elegance, just steps away from the silk curtains, was a world of disturbing cruelty. Enslaved men and women were reduced to commodities, cataloged in ledgers, priced like livestock, stripped of names, dignity, and humanity. On the auction blocks, bodies were prodded, teeth inspected, muscles examined. The masters wielded absolute authority. They controlled labor, love, marriage, movement, even the right to breathe another day. Violence was not an accident of the system, it was the system itself. And in that system, enslaved people had no voice, no recourse, no defense against what was done to them in secret. The cruelty cut along gendered lines. Women endured the fields, the kitchens, the endless work, but also the bedrooms. They were forced into reproduction, bearing children who were often sold away, punished for the crimes committed against them. Men were broken physically, emasculated socially, denied the right to protect their families. Yet their bodies too were fetishized, treated as objects of strength, sometimes forced into humiliating spectacles, sometimes pulled into the shadows of masters' obsessions. But the dirtiest secrets weren't written in the ledgers of labor and profit. They lived in the hidden chambers of the plantation house, in the attics and barns, in the candlelit corners of bedrooms, in the locked doors that outsiders were never meant to open. Here, power was not about money. It was about indulgence, obsession, the disturbing thrill of domination. White masters routinely violated enslaved women, their assaults producing mixed-race children they disowned, denied, or sold away. These children were proof of the crimes, so the solution was silence. Sell them, erase them, bury the evidence in the market. Letters and wills reveal the strategies of concealment, the shame and secrecy woven into property, transactions. But shame did not stop the acts. It only forced them deeper into the shadows. And it was not only women who bore this torment. Enslaved men were also drawn into the filthy hunger of masters who treated their bodies as sites of experimentation, humiliation, and fetish. Forced to fight one another for entertainment, forced to labor beyond exhaustion, forced to serve in roles meant to degrade. For some masters, cruelty itself became a theater of pleasure, punishment staged not for discipline, but for twisted gratification. Diaries and whispers spoke of rituals too disturbing to be published in their time, a double life of polished dignity by day and filthy obsession by night. What would you do if you found your ancestors' journal, its pages describing these acts in chilling detail? What if the family name you took pride in was built on the unspeakable suffering of others? The answers are not comfortable, but the truth is nastier, filthier, and more disturbing than the polished myths we were taught to believe. For the enslaved, survival was a daily war fought in silence. The scars they carried were not just the welts of the whip or the bruises from chains. They were emotional wounds, psychic fractures, generational curses carved into flesh and memory. Enslaved women lived under the shadow of constant violation, their bodies used, their motherhood turned into a weapon against them. To bring a child into the world was not joy, but terror. At any moment, the child could be torn away, sold to strangers, erased from the mother's life forever. And the cries that followed, those heart-shattering, soul-breaking cries, were drowned out by the laughter of masters who called it business. Men, too, bore wounds less visible, but just as devastating. They were denied the role of protector, forced to watch wives and daughters taken by force, powerless to intervene. They were beaten into submission, their dignity stripped, their masculinity humiliated. Yet in grotesque irony, these same men were sometimes fetishized, displayed for their strength, forced to labor until their bodies collapsed, or reduced to objects of disturbing desire by masters obsessed with control. To live as a black man under slavery was to live in constant contradiction, degraded yet coveted, despised yet desired, and still they resisted. Resistance did not always come with fire and open revolt, though some dared even that. Resistance lived in whispers, in songs sung under breath while hoeing fields, in stories told to children about freedom, in secret prayers whispered at night. It lived in small acts of defiance, breaking a piece of fine china in the master's dining room, moving slower in the fields, hiding away scraps of food to feed a hungry child. Each act was risky. Each act was dangerous. But each act was also survival, proof that even in the nastiest, dirtiest corners of human cruelty, the spirit fought to endure. The impact of this torment stretched across generations. Trauma does not vanish when a lash stops falling. It seeps into memory, into family lines, into culture. Stories were passed down not always in words but in silences, in the way mothers clutched their children tighter, in the way men swallowed anger rather than risk violence, in the way entire communities learned to carry grief as part of daily life. These were wounds that never fully healed, scars that whispered across centuries. And yet, for so long, these filthy truths remained hidden. Slave narratives began to pull them into the light. Brave men and women who escaped bondage risked everything to tell their stories. Stories that shocked audiences. Stories that made some refuse to believe because the reality was too disturbing to accept. They wrote of masters who used religion to justify cruelty, who read scripture in the morning and committed unspeakable acts by night. They wrote of children born in shame, sold like cattle to erase evidence. They wrote of punishments designed not to teach, but to humiliate, to break spirits while satisfying twisted urges. Court records, rare and often buried, revealed scandals when mixed-race children could not be ignored, when inheritance battles exposed the hidden truths. Letters written in private confessed what society could not acknowledge. Instructions to hide children, to dispose of them, to silence enslaved women who might speak out. The hypocrisy was staggering. Men celebrated as fathers of nations, architects of liberty, while behind their locked doors they lived as predators, obsessed with domination, consumed by filthy addictions to power. Today, modern science has become a tool of exposure. DNA testing continues to uncover bloodlines that link black families to white masters, undeniable proof of the filthy secrets history tried to erase. What was once whispered, denied, dismissed, now stares back in cold genetic truth. Every match, every revelation, every unexpected cousin is a reminder that the past cannot be buried. The blood remembers, even when the history books do not. For black families, these revelations are painful validation. The stories passed down in whispers, the silences that haunted generations, suddenly stand proven. For white descendants, the reactions vary: denial, shame, silence, or the painful task of confronting family legacies steeped in cruelty. For historians, the work is dangerous, pushing against narratives that still cling to myths of nobility and honor. The truth is disturbing, filthy, and deeply unsettling, but it cannot be erased. Every portrait of a smiling master, every heirloom polished and displayed, every statue built in pride is stained with the suffering of those he owned, violated, and destroyed. Behind every myth of honor lies the dirty truth that obsession, cruelty, and lust built empires just as much as cotton and sugar did. So how do we reconcile a world built on disturbing lies? How do we look into the eyes of history's portraits and see not the gentlemen of refinement, not the fathers of liberty, but predators draped in silk, hiding filthy secrets behind polished smiles? The answer is uncomfortable, because it forces us to admit that the myths we were taught were not simply incomplete, they were deliberate. Entire generations were fed a story designed to protect the image of white masters while bearing the unspeakable truths of black suffering. Theories have tried to explain it. Some argue that absolute power corrupted them absolutely, that once you could buy, sell, punish, or kill another human being without consequence, depravity was inevitable. Others point to the intoxicating blend of patriarchy and supremacy. White men told they were kings of their households, rulers of plantations, gods on earth. But perhaps the dirtiest secret of all is simpler and more disturbing. They did it because they could, and because no one was willing to hold them accountable. The psychology of secrecy fed the obsession. The forbidden always excites, and when forbidden acts are hidden by silence, they grow like rot in the dark. Masters believed their mansions impenetrable, their reputations untouchable, their power eternal. Behind locked doors, they indulged in fantasies of domination, cruelty, humiliation, lust. They believed history would protect them, that their names would survive untainted, their statues raised high. And for centuries it worked. The victims were silenced, the evidence destroyed, the lies preserved. But the truth never truly dies. It lingers in family bloodlines, in whispered memories, in the grief carried down through generations. It lingers in the silence of descendants who wonder why their family tree contains names that don't fit, in the faces that carry both African and European features, but are explained away as coincidence. It lingers in the music, the prayers, the cultural echoes of pain and resilience. And it lingers in the very soil, plantation fields where the sweat, blood, and tears of enslaved men and women soaked into the earth, feeding the wealth of those who violated them. Picture it now, a grand plantation hall, empty and dim, its chandeliers dusty, its portraits cracked with time. The men in those portraits stare back at us with pride, painted as noble patriarchs, their hands resting on books or canes. But listen closely, and you hear the other sound, the faint echo of chains dragging across wooden floors, the muffled cries behind locked doors, the prayers whispered in the night. Those sounds are just as real as the paint, just as real as the oil on canvas, and they will outlast the lies. History may try to polish the past, to bury the filth, to turn predators into heroes. But the disturbing truths of slavery cannot stay buried forever. When exposed, they remind us of something essential, that honor without justice is a mask, that wealth without humanity is theft, and that power without accountability becomes obsession, cruelty, and destruction. This is not just Black history. This is human history. And until we face it, its nastiest, dirtiest, most disturbing parts, we cannot claim to know who we truly are. The filthy secrets of white masters may break your heart, but to ignore them would be to betray the memory of every man, woman, and child who suffered in silence. So the next time you walk past a statue, glance at a portrait, or hear the words Founding Father or Southern Gentleman, ask yourself, what secrets were buried in that house? What lies were painted over in that smile? And when history tells you the past is gone, ask yourself, are we lying to ourselves? Because the chains may be gone, the mansions may be crumbling, but the echoes remain, and those echoes demand to be heard.